Hello everyone and welcome back to another Paletteful Packs unboxing. Today I've got the May box and all of my supplies seem to have magically floated out of the box by themselves. It looks like we've got some really awesome supplies here, so I'm going to whip out my phone so I can look at our little info card. Again, you can do this by going to Menu and this month's box. We've got the Petite pack. And now we've got all of our information. The first thing we've got in here is our Peerless transparent watercolors, and I am so intrigued by these. I've seen stuff like this before, but apparently they're like paper with the watercolor like embedded inside. Here, let's open it up and see. So here's the actual watercolor, and I guess you wet the paper with your paintbrush and it deposits the watercolor like straight off the paper. And these are just so interesting and I'm so excited to try these, and this is just, I'm so excited. In our little info card it says that these paints are a little different than traditional watercolors. You don't say. They are made of a proprietary paper-based film that allows the paint to be mixed and used straight off the sheet. The sheet won't disintegrate like normal paper, and when you're done painting, it just dries and you can use it again. There are 15 colors in here. They are transparent, handmade, non-toxic, professional grade watercolor paints. That's amazing. And with how big the sheets are, it looks like this will last you forever. In the little booklet itself, there's some information about the company itself, about the paints. I like how each paint has like a name and a little bit of information about like the history of it and how the color was made, which is super cool. I don't know, this just feels like so luxurious. I don't know how to explain it. I'm so excited. There's also a few tips on how to use these, which I will go over in just a minute. And the company also has their own YouTube channel. I will link that in the description so you guys can check it out. And I'll probably watch a little bit myself before I dive into these. I always love it when companies have like some videos I can watch and kind of get some inspiration on how to use them, so that's super cool. Next up, we've got some Marubou water brushes. We've gotten these a few times in Paletteful packs before. They are a super handy paintbrush where you can fill the reservoir with water, so it's really easy to use, and also you can use these on the go very easily. Love having a good supply of water brushes on hand. And for our surface, we've got some watercolor postcards by Strathmore. I love using these. I love the size of them. And the really cool thing about these is they're actually a postcard. So you can stick a stamp on, stick a little note on, and you can actually send these out in the mail. I've sent some of these to my mom before because we live in different states, and it's always just such a lovely little surprise and a lovely little gift that you can send to people. I absolutely love these, and I just ran out, so I'm super happy to get some more. And of course, we've got our little stickers, little paintbrush. This is Paletteful Packs on it. Oh, I love that they've started including stickers because I am a sticker fiend, so this is going on my sketchbook. For our Paletteful Pack prompts, we've got seascape, favorite food, unusual, and butterflies. I am so jazzed about this box, guys. You have no idea. I am just like buzzing. So I'm going to play with these, test them out, and yeah, let's have some fun with these. Oh! Okay, so I have filled up all of my brushes with water. It's super easy to do. You just unscrew this top part and you can fill the little chamber with water. I've also got a palette here because I'm going to try a few different techniques with the watercolors, and I've got a scrap piece of watercolor paper because we've only got 15 of these and I want to save them for like actual finished pieces. So this is just a scrap of watercolor paper just to do our tests and our swatches on. I'm just going to take the color directly from the paper and place it on my swatch card. But the first thing to do is you actually want to get the water kind of going into your brush. There's a little area on the brush where you can push to actually start like flowing the water. So I'm just going to start by doing that and making sure my brush is nice and wet. And now I'm so excited. I'm just wetting down a little piece of this paper and voila. Oh my goodness. That is so pretty! What? So you can see my hands, they're absolutely like stained with the watercolor. I don't think I've ever had like watercolor stains on my hands before. And you can see when I try to like wipe away some like water spots, I just am making like a huge mess. So I wonder if that's just because of the nature of these kind of like paper watercolors, but that's something that's very interesting that I don't really, like most of my other watercolors kind of just like wipe off, so that's interesting. So I did a little bit of stalking on the YouTube channel for the Peerless watercolors, which is super helpful, by the way. I highly recommend going and watching some of their videos to kind of see how these paints work. Their videos are awesome and very comprehensive. But I'm going to take some of the techniques that they used, and something that they did a lot of was they would kind of take the watercolor and deposit it into a palette and do all the mixing on the palette. That way you can also dilute the colors, because as you can see, dropping them directly onto the canvas is a lot. These colors are very rich and vibrant, and also just a lot. And that could be really great in some areas, but for some other areas you definitely want a more diluted color. So what I'm going to do is try to mix some skin color. So I'm going to start by depositing the colors that I want onto my palette. And now that I have all my colors, I'm going to mix them over here. So I'll take a bunch of yellow and a bunch of pink to create a nice like orangey color. Add a tiny bit of the brown, and we have got our skin tone. The colors are mixing beautifully together, absolutely beautifully. And there we have a very simple and quick kind of skin tone experiment, I guess. If you dilute the colors, you can get some really, really pastel tones, which is something I really like. And you get some really beautiful blooms too. A lot of the watercolors I use kind of have a bit more of like a smoother look to them, but I think because these are more of a staining aspect to them, when they bloom, they kind of stay bloomed, which is, I think, is really, really lovely. I love the textures that I'm seeing, and I'm really excited to experiment more. So what should I try next? Honestly, my favorite thing to do is just to look through pictures that I've taken of my garden and use those. So I'm going to do a really quick study of this rose, because we've got the most beautiful warm colors and I really want to push them. So I'm going to take this rose as inspiration and really see how vibrant I can get these going. So after I quickly sketched the rose, I went right in with the colors, and guys, these may be one of my new favorite products, and this is hands down my favorite Paletteful Packs box I've ever gotten. I just need to gush about these paints for a minute. They're so beautiful. Look at these. They were just, oh, I love these. I love them so much, and I'm so excited to play more with these. They reacted mostly like traditional watercolors, especially if I had them on the palette, with just a little slight differences. I did mention before I thought they had kind of a staining aspect to them, and that part was definitely true the more I painted with them. They did not lift easily, which is something that I actually love, because once you put down the color, it kind of just stays there. And especially if you use like a wet on wet technique and you get the colors kind of mixing together on the paper, when it dries in a way that creates these beautiful blooms. My cat was in the way, sorry about that. I'm just gonna push him off. Anyway, so yes, when the paint would dry, it would create this really beautiful bloom and textures that would stay there. When I usually use watercolors, I use a lot of layers, and those blooms can actually kind of get lost, because when you re-wet the paper to add another layer, the watercolor could lift and then you kind of lose a lot of those initial textures. That was not the case with these, which was so interesting and so awesome. I loved it. And I'm not exactly sure what it is about these paints that made it that way, but they were just incredible. Let's back up a little bit. I will explain what I'm painting right now. I decided to paint a mermaid because it is the month of May, and a lot of artists do this art challenge called Mermaid, where we paint mermaids all in May. It's a pun. Anyway, so I decided to paint a mermaid, and I really wanted to push the colors. I wanted a mix of pastel and vibrant. I wanted a mix of cool and warm colors, so I kind of just threw it all onto this piece, and I'm so happy with it. I'm actually so proud of this piece. I think it turned out awesome, and I just absolutely adored using these paints. The way that I used them, and I'm going to kind of give a few tips on how I used them and how I think would be a good way to use them, but of course, take my advice if you would like or not. These are very, very versatile, so I'm excited to see how you guys use them, but a little bit on how I used them. I worked in many, many layers, and this piece actually took me a fair bit of time longer than a piece normally would have, because I really, really built up those layers. I would start very, very light, very pastel. I would take just a drop of the color and put it into my palette and really dilute it with the water. This was because I wasn't sure like how the dilution would work. I really needed to kind of play around with the water to paint ratio. And it took a little time, but I eventually kind of got it a little more where I wanted to be. But especially in the first part, those colors were very, very light and pastel. But I think that was important because if I went in too vibrant, too dark, it wouldn't have turned out exactly how I wanted. I wanted her skin to almost look pearlescent, and I think that it turned out good. These colors, like I was kind of mentioning before, they blend together so incredibly beautifully. And I did a few different blending techniques. I did both blending the colors on the palette and then transferring it to the paper. I did that a lot with the skin. And if I wanted like very precise colors, I would use that method of using the palette. But where I added like her blue scales and like her blue and purple face makeup, I would actually use a wet on wet technique where I would lay down the color and then lay down some water on top and then lay down a different color, and the two colors would kind of mix together on that paper because of the wet on wet technique, and that's when I would get those interesting blooms and textures that I love so much. So you can see the like scales on her face, they're not as smooth as like say her cheeks or her eyes, but that is exactly what I wanted because look how interesting it looks. There's these blooms and these textures, and you can see really where the water kind of just did its own thing. And like I mentioned before, that can get lost with some other watercolors that I use because of the lifting aspect, but they didn't have that with here. In fact, the colors didn't really lift at all, which is something that I thought was a huge plus. It really is a pet peeve of mine if a watercolor is too lifty because I work in so many layers and I want those layers to stay. I don't want to have to fight the watercolors. I want to be able to lay it down, and then if I'm happy with that, lay down something else on top of it and keep what was underneath. And that's exactly what happened here. One way that I really used that method was I actually painted around the fish in this kind of like blue yellow colors. And I would paint like the hair or the skin on top of it, but those blues and those yellows still are peeking through the other colors, and it creates this really beautiful, these beautiful textures and these beautiful colors that I didn't really plan. And I think it looks really, really cool. Another thing that surprised me was these colors weren't getting muddy. I was kind of worried about that because I wasn't quite sure what I was doing, and because I work in so many layers, I tend to overwork things and I can make my pieces look kind of muddy. Like there's just too many different colors and it just kind of looks like a mess. And I'm very happy to say that I didn't really experience that with this. The colors just layered on top beautifully, and I think this is in part because the colors are lovely, and also in part because I did use so many like soft pastel layers. I really kind of took my time, and all of my layers were very light, and I was able to kind of control how dark I was getting things. So that was just so fun. This has definitely been my favorite box. I am so stoked about these. I just think they're so fun and so pretty, and I feel so inspired to create more art with these. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy these too. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me paint this little mermaid, and I really hope you find the best way to use these for yourself. Definitely play and experiment, play with different levels of diluting the paints, play with wet on wet, wet on dry techniques, all that good stuff. Really just go at it, have fun. Go buck wild with these because they're so fun and I absolutely loved them. Alright, so there we have it, another awesome Paletteful Packs box, my absolute favorite that I've ever gotten. I've already jazzed up these supplies enough, so I hope you guys really enjoyed watching me paint this. Please, 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 please show us the work that you do too. Be sure to tag us on social media, use our hashtags PaletteFulPacks and hashtag PaletteFulPrompt. I'm so excited to see what you guys do with these amazing paints. So if you have not yet become part of the Paletteful Packs family, please do check out our info box below so you can join us for next month. I also have the Peerless Watercolor YouTube channel linked down below so you can check that out too. That's going to be all for me today, guys. So until next month, I will see y'all later. Bye, guys!